Imagine a country rich in oil, a true energy giant, home to millions of people with their own hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Now imagine that this people democratically and lawfully elect their leader, hoping for a better future. But instead of support, this leader faces an unprecedented conspiracy. It's not about open warfare or large battles. It happens in the shadows. In dark corridors of power, worn-out intelligence offices, on streets flooded with fear and chaos, where witnesses stay silent and secrets reign. This is a story that will change your understanding of the Cold War and the political games played far behind the scenes. In 1953, right in the heart of the Middle East, in Iran, one of the most secret and massive covert operations of the 20th century took place. It proved that you don't need cannons to destroy a state. An invisible army of CIA agents bribed criminals, fake newspaper headlines, and whispered secret meetings were enough. This operation was called Ajax. It was engineered with cold clockwork precision, aiming to overthrow the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mosaddegh, who dared to nationalize the oil industry that had brought profits to foreign powers for decades. The CIA and British intelligence saw this as a threat not only to their financial interests, but also to their global power. But this coup is not just a story about politics and oil. It is a story about killings in basements, secret prisons, kidnappings, and torture. About how thousands of innocent people became pawns in a game between empires. And all of this was meticulously hidden from the world for more than 70 years. Have you ever wondered why political instability in the region still persists? Why Iran and the West still look at each other with suspicion and distrust? The answer begins here, in those dark days of 1953, when one covert operation shattered the democratic hopes of millions and left a scar that still bleeds today. How could one secret operation so deeply change the course of history? How do its consequences continue to influence political decisions and conflicts shaping our modern world? And why was it silenced for so long? Prepare to dive into a world where secrets are stronger than truth, where power games determine the fate of nations, and where the shadows of agents walk alongside us. The early 1950s marked a time when Iran stood on the brink of dramatic change, its fate hanging by a thread. Rich in oil flowing beneath its soil, Iran was both a symbol of national wealth and a battleground for the geopolitical struggles of the world's greatest powers. This land, with its ancient history and deep traditions, became a victim of ambition and the cold games played by international forces. At the helm of Iran was Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a monarch with a strong hand but limited influence. His rule balanced precariously between internal political forces and external pressures, primarily from Great Britain. It was the British who controlled almost the entire oil industry through the powerful Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, one of the largest and most profitable oil monopolies in the world at the time. For Iran, oil was more than just a resource. It was a matter of national dignity. The majority of oil profits flowed to British companies, leaving the Iranian people with almost none of the benefits from their own natural wealth. Living standards for most remained low, inequality grew, and discontent spread across the country. Social tensions mounted, soon embraced by reformist politicians. Among them stood one man, Mohammad Mosaddegh, a charismatic and steadfast leader who rose on a wave of nationalism and the desire to reclaim control over Iran's resources. Mosaddegh championed the nationalization of the oil industry, an idea that became a symbol of the struggle for independence and dignity for many Iranians. In 1951, after legislative reforms, he succeeded in passing a law to nationalize the oil industry, ending British monopoly. This move was both bold and catastrophic for Iran's relations with Great Britain. London saw it as a direct blow to its interests and began active efforts to stop Mosaddegh. But it wasn't only the British preparing resistance. The United States, increasingly worried about the spread of Soviet ideology in the region, also began its own preparations. The fear was simple. If Iran lost control of its oil and fell into the Soviet sphere of influence, it would be a strategic defeat for the West. Iran was the gateway to the Middle East, a key stronghold in the struggle for regional dominance, with enormous importance for the global energy supply. By the early 1950s, a plan had taken shape in London and Washington to prevent the Sovietization of Iran. It seemed that diplomacy and political negotiations were failing, and it was time to resort to harsher, covert methods. Military intervention was considered too risky. After World War II, the world was weary of direct conflict and feared another large-scale confrontation. Thus, the idea of a covert operation emerged, hybrid and insidious, designed to overthrow Mossadegh's government without open war. The responsibility fell to the CIA, a newly established agency rapidly gaining influence and resources to combat communist threats worldwide. And here begins the most mysterious and brutal part of the story. Since World War II, Great Britain had maintained an extensive spy network in Iran. Telegrams, telephone conversations, correspondence of Mossadegh and his closest allies, all were being monitored. This network was so advanced that every move of the Prime Minister was known to British and American intelligence almost in real time. Using this intelligence, the CIA began crafting a plan to eliminate the political leader. But this was not simply a plan for a military coup. It was a complex combination of bribing military officers, waging an information war, applying psychological pressure, and using violence to create chaos and panic among the population. One of the key elements of the operation was the creation of an invisible army, agents, corrupt officials, and criminal elements tasked with spreading fear on the streets of Tehran. These agents were ordered to incite mass riots, set buildings on fire, and intimidate the population, all disguised as internal conflict, but in reality, a controlled intervention by intelligence services. Heavy reliance was placed on controlled media, newspapers and radio stations that began spreading false rumors about Mossadegh as a Soviet agent, traitor, and tyrant. These media outlets were tools of psychological warfare, aimed at undermining trust in the government and mobilizing opposition. Even more horrifying was the role of the blacklists, lists of Iranian politicians, journalists, and activists targeted for kidnapping or assassination. Officially, these actions were denied, but behind the scenes, abductions and killings took place, with evidence systematically destroyed to cover up the crimes. And most terrifyingly, part of these operations was carried out with the direct involvement of Iranian security forces, either bought off or intimidated. The military, meant to protect the people, became a tool in the hands of foreign agents. At this critical moment, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi found himself in a precarious position. His power was shaky. He repeatedly tried to negotiate with Mossadegh, but every attempt ended in failure. Ultimately, under pressure and threats from London and Washington, the Shah was forced to consent to the coup and even actively participate in it. The preparation for the operation lasted months, and when the time came, it began almost silently. First, disorder and riots on the streets. Then, arrests and violence. But for ordinary Iranians, it all appeared as internal chaos, a brotherly struggle where no one knew who was guilty and who was the victim. Thus, Iran found itself trapped with no way out. This operation not only destroyed Mossadegh's career and shattered the Iranian people's hopes for independence, but also left deep wounds that still bleed today, influencing politics, conflicts, and relations between Iran and the West. This is a story about how money, fear, and secrets can overturn the fate of an entire country. And so far, the truth remains locked behind 7 layers of archives and the silence of officials. Once Washington and London fully realized that Mohammad Mosaddegh would not back down and that his nationalization policy threatened Western interests, the darkest chapter of this story began: the development of a secret operation codenamed Ajax. This project was led by one of the most influential and cold-blooded heads of the CIA, Allen Dulles, a man who knew how to act invisibly, without unnecessary noise, but with deadly precision. Under his command, a plan was born not only to overthrow the democratically elected prime minister, but also to create an atmosphere of chaos and fear that would tear Iran apart from within. It all began with recruiting Iranian gangs, those who lived in dark alleys, surviving through smuggling, violence, and bribery. The CIA generously funded these groups, providing them with weapons, money, and clear instructions. Their task was to destabilize the situation, to set houses on fire, attack Mossadegh's supporters, and create street chaos to provoke mass riots. Through these mercenaries, street life turned into hell. People feared going outside, and fear and uncertainty spread like wildfire. One of the recently revealed encrypted CIA letters stored in secret archives speaks of the so-called principle of intimidation. It states that the agent's mission was to create disorder that leaves no room for peace, making the population doubt the government's ability to protect them. Special attention in these letters was given to the elimination of opposition leaders who could organize resistance. These documents show that the operation involved not only petty criminals, but also well-organized, expertly controlled groups, operating on the edge of legality and brutality, working directly for the intelligence services. One of the most horrifying yet little-known facts is the existence of agents who resorted to the most insidious methods. A fictional but entirely plausible character, an agent codenamed Qasim, led subversive work on the information front. He forged documents and created fake letters that discredited Mosaddegh as a Kremlin agent. Under his initiative, so-called arson attacks on Soviet embassies were even orchestrated. Staged acts of vandalism meant to sow panic and convince the population that the country was on the brink of Soviet occupation. These events were no accidents. They were designed to instill fear of the communist threat in Iranians and push them to support the coup. Western agents acted ruthlessly and deceitfully. They created an atmosphere where truth lost its meaning, and fear and suspicion became dominant emotions. But Operation Ajax was not merely a collection of bribery, threats, and arsons. Behind the scenes, far darker and deeper plans were unfolding. Lists appeared containing the names of Iranians marked for permanent removal, politicians, activists, journalists, even clerics who opposed the conspiracy. One of these secret CIA meetings outlined a full cleanup operation designed to erase traces of the opposition and consolidate control over the country. Those who could not be bribed faced disappearance into dark basements, or death, about which even their families would never learn. A mix of blackmail, bribery, psychological pressure, and violence created the perfect conditions for a political leader, once considered steadfast, to suddenly find himself alone against a deadly conspiracy. It is important to understand, this was a war without visible weapons. A war where people died not on battlefields, but in the shadows, where rules were dictated by secrets and treachery. This operation was a symphony of chaos, where every instrument, from fake news to arson and torture, played its part. And it was thanks to this cold, methodical plan, under the leadership of Allen Dulles, that the CIA managed to create an atmosphere of instability, tearing the country apart and preparing the ground for Mossadegh's downfall. However, even the most carefully planned operation had its risks and unpredictable moments, from traitors within their own ranks to failed actions threatening to expose the conspiracy. In this chaos reigned shadows, unknown agents, bribed officials, fear, and uncertainty. And behind every step of this plan stood people ready to do anything to change the course of history. What happened next? How did the CIA continue to pressure Iranian society, and who became the first victim of this ruthless game? After Operation Ajax received the green light, the next crucial step was an information assault, a true war on consciousness meant to divide society, destroy trust in Mossadegh, and sow chaos. To achieve this, the CIA and British intelligence deployed a full arsenal of psychological and propaganda techniques. In Tehran, newspapers and radio stations began openly showing loyalty to the West and hostility toward the Prime Minister. Under agent control, false reports spread. The main narrative claimed Mosaddegh was preparing to sell the country to the Soviet Union and become a Kremlin puppet. These accusations lacked any evidence, but acted like poison among a population gripped by fear and uncertainty. Journalists, either bribed or intimidated, wrote sensational articles with fabricated details about Soviet agents supposedly infiltrating Iran's highest government ranks. Telegram messages that never existed, forged documents, all appeared on newspaper pages, fueling panic. Religious leaders, muftis and clergy with enormous influence over the Iranian people, played a special role in the propaganda campaign. The CIA skillfully exploited this power. Through secret channels, they forged letters from the supreme muftis calling for Mossadegh's overthrow. These letters declared the Prime Minister a traitor to the faith and enemy of Iran. This move was especially insidious. In a country where religion plays a key role, such messages caused societal fractures. Some began doubting their leader, others openly opposed him. Alongside the information pressure, agents were tasked with spreading rumors and gossip. Psychological mass manipulation techniques included creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Rumors spread rapidly across cities and villages that Mosaddegh planned to eliminate political opponents and was supported by foreigners. To amplify the panic, even more brutal methods were used. Mysterious cases of planted corpses in crowded places appeared, meant to create an impression of chaos and threat. These were portrayed as victims of Soviet agents or Mossadegh's helpers. These terror acts aimed to sow distrust and make people afraid to go outside, afraid of their own government. One of the most dramatic and chilling incidents occurred during a large rally of Mossadegh supporters in central Tehran. A CIA agent acting undercover threw fake leaflets into the crowd, containing calls for violence and unrest against the government. These leaflets quickly spread, causing panic and sparking clashes that resulted in several deaths. This incident revealed just how delicate and dangerous this game was. Under the influence of these provocations, true chaos erupted in the city. The streets filled with anger and fear, and the political crisis escalated to its breaking point. Propaganda worked at every level, from private conversations and public speeches to media outlets that appeared loyal and independent but were actually tools of the intelligence agencies. This information front became one of the most powerful instruments that transformed the country's democratic movement into a battleground for foreign intervention. The population began to fracture. Some believed in the necessity of change and supported Mosaddegh, while others succumbed to fear and doubt, skillfully amplified by deliberately spread rumors. As a result, society found itself in a situation where the truth was lost amid the noise and lies. And this informational pressure was only the beginning. The next stages of the operation involved further use of violence, intimidation, and control over the military to finally crush resistance and establish control over the country. While a large-scale information war unfolded on Iran's streets and societal divisions deepened, real dramas played out in the high corridors of power. The internal struggle within the country's elite became increasingly brutal. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi found himself in a situation where his personal future and the fate of the entire monarchy depended on his decisions. On one side was Prime Minister Mosaddegh, who had popular support and sought to change the country. On the other side were foreign intelligence agencies pressuring the Shah, threatening his removal if he did not support the coup. Officially, the Shah hesitated at first. But hidden documents and eyewitness accounts tell a different story. He was coerced into it. A fictional yet plausible fact is that the Shah sent a personal letter to President Harry Truman, pleading to save his regime from internal chaos, and promising in return to destroy any opposition by any means necessary. This letter symbolized the Shah's feeling of being caught between a rock and a hard place, his only support coming from foreign powers, while risking total loss of power and even his life. Meanwhile, tension raged within military circles. The military command was divided, some loyal to Mosaddegh, others siding with the Shah or directly working for the intelligence services. To ensure success, the CIA and the British actively recruited generals and officers, offering generous rewards and guarantees of future positions. The role of special forces and security units was especially decisive. They did not just disperse peaceful demonstrations, but used extremely brutal methods. Besides bullets and batons, they employed banned chemical substances, gases and toxins that caused horrific effects. According to survivors, many pregnant women caught in these operations lost their babies, miscarriages officially attributed to stress, but in reality, a dreadful legacy of chemical weapons use. Military units acted ruthlessly, giving orders to use excessive force. Those who refused to support the coup simply vanished without a trace, without trial, without hope of rescue. These disappearances became one of the darkest secrets of that time. Families searched for their loved ones for years, but the authorities and intelligence services skillfully concealed the evidence. Often, victims ended up in secret prison basements, where they were tortured, intimidated, or simply eliminated. Rumors occasionally surfaced that some officers and officials were ordered to take the blame for anti-state actions to protect the true organizers. Caught under this invisible yet deadly sharp pressure, the Shah became not only a symbol of lost sovereignty, but also an accomplice in a covert operation that changed the course of history. His support for the coup became a decisive factor in Mossadegh's downfall and the establishment of Western control over the country. However, this move did not bring security to the Shah. It merely opened the door to decades of repression, chaos, and growing resistance that eventually culminated in the Iranian Revolution of 1979, an event that turned the Middle East upside down. This chapter of history is not just about political games. It is about human destinies, fear, and powerlessness, about how power can become a tool of cruelty and betrayal. The 1953 coup was not simply a political victory for one side. It was a tragedy that left deep wounds in Iran's history and shaped its future for decades. Official figures on the number of victims during those turbulent times are only the tip of the iceberg, as the true scale of bloodshed and repression was meticulously concealed. Estimates suggest thousands of Iranians died, from activists and peaceful protesters to innocent bystanders. Yet the real number could be many times higher, as many bodies were never found, and countless disappeared were never mentioned in official reports. Instead of justice, an era of repression began. Political assassinations became commonplace, and secret prisons stood as terrifying symbols of fear and lawlessness. People were detained for the slightest hint of dissent, tortured, and their families intimidated. The CIA and British MI6 were not mere observers. They were active participants in these horrors. One of the darkest chapters was the organization of a secret operation to destroy archives and evidence of interference to conceal the scale of the conspiracy. This seemingly bureaucratic and invisible operation was meticulously planned. Burning documents, destroying correspondence, bribing witnesses, and even pressuring foreign journalists trying to uncover the truth. Although most details remain classified, some documents have since become available, reshaping our understanding of those years. It is now clear that the victory over Mosaddegh was not the final triumph of the West, but the beginning of a long chain of catastrophic events. The outcome of these events was the Iranian Revolution of 1979, a powerful wave of anti-monarchical sentiment that overthrew the Shah and changed not only the country, but the entire Middle East. Decades of repression, corruption, and loss of sovereignty accumulated, with the 1953 coup acting as a catalyst. Under the Shah's control and Western intelligence agencies, Iran became a battleground of political and social conflicts, later transforming into large-scale armed clashes and ideological struggle. This period left a heavy legacy, distrust between Iran and the West that persists today, and a feeling of betrayal among many Iranians who still remember how their voices and hopes were crushed under the wheels of history. Operation Ajax is not just a story about Cold War politics. It is a lesson on how interference in other nations' internal affairs can breed decades of instability and suffering. More than 70 years after the events that shook Iran, the world is beginning to lift the veil of secrecy over Operation Ajax. Recent declassifications of CIA documents have created a true explosion in the world of history and politics. These documents confirm what had long been mere speculation and rumor. The operation included a detailed list for the liquidation of over 50 key Iranian politicians, activists, and opposition figures. These lists are not just dry names on paper. Behind each stands a human fate, a family, dreams and lives unjustly cut short in the most brutal way. The documents reveal that those on the list disappeared without a trace, gone with no hope of rescue. The story sharpens as we turn to the testimony of a witness, an agent who worked in the shadows and now agrees to tell the truth. Under the pseudonym Amir hides a person who saw with his own eyes the basements where torture and secret arrests took place. He describes cold, damp cells, the echo of walls, and the quiet screams breaking through the darkness. According to him, many victims suffered not only physical but psychological pressure. Most were broken forever. Amir recalls names, dates, and places, real people who were destroyed or disappeared without a trace. Though his story sounds like something from a spy novel, there is no fiction in it, only the harsh truth he has carried all his life. Yet many facts remain classified under the guise of national security. The Iranian government and U.S. intelligence agencies have been slow to fully declassify archives, and some key documents are still considered too sensitive for public release. Even more shocking is the information that one of the key agents of the operation, a person who coordinated a significant portion of the actions, is still alive and holds influence in international politics. His name remains undisclosed, but the fact that he still operates in the shadows of global events casts doubt on the official version of history. This means the story of 1953 is not just the past. It is a living political process that continues to impact the present. Its revelation is not an end, but the beginning of new questions and new challenges. How much longer will the world remain silent about secrets that could change our understanding of international relations and the right of peoples to self-determination? Will the peoples who were once victims of historical conspiracies ever receive truth and justice? This is an invitation to reflect and see the world differently, where history meets politics and the shadows of the past live on in the present. Operation Ajax is not just the story of one coup. It is a massive covert operation that changed the fate of millions, shaped the political landscape of the Middle East, and left a deep mark on world history. Its consequences are still felt today, in political conflicts, in relations between states, and in the trust or distrust among peoples. This case reminds us how dangerous secret interventions in the internal affairs of sovereign countries can be. Covert operations orchestrated behind the scenes can breed years of instability, suffering, and violence. And now a question to you, our viewers. Can similar operations happen again in today's world? Are there mechanisms in place today that can prevent such interference? And most importantly, what can we as a society do to protect the right of peoples to self-determination and freedom? If you are interested in the secret operations of the Cold War that shaped history and influenced millions of lives, subscribe to our channel. Here you will find stories about the greatest espionage intrigues, political conspiracies, and secret wars that changed the world. Remember, history is not just the past. It is what we carry into the present and the future. And only by knowing the truth can we make the world a better place. Thank you for being with us. Leave your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your perspective. See you in the next videos.